D.C. just moved there. I think it's like 800,000. To me, an eye-popping number of residents in the greater Boise area, number one. Number two, lots of transplants, as far as I could tell from their perspective, and an odd and maybe challenging mix of political views in Idaho, and Portland, the blue dot in a red state. What are some ways that politics and the challenge of that have challenged your colleagues as they started City Up?
That is a great question, and Boise is a fantastic example because we saw the huge growth in that market, and we saw the number of transplants. But you're right that a lot of the transplants are very politically conservative. It's people who are fleeing they perceive liberal parts of California and getting to somewhere which is more accessible to their political
well said
views.
Yeah.
And it is true that our podcasts tend to lean to the left, not out of intention, but we have a young and pretty progressive staff, and when you hire young and progressive people who live in cities, you tend to get politics that are a little bit more to the left. That actually isn't true in D.C. The way it's working out is D.C. we have I would say, a really interesting mix. We have two hosts, one of whom is, I would say, more progressive, one of whom is less progressive, and it's a fantastic dynamic.
Point counterpoint, huh?
Yeah, and we're covering issues that are you would say might be a more conservative position in the city, and we have some who are taking their positions more liberal.
That's the voice of David Plotz. He's our guest today on What's Working in Washington. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. We're talking about his company, CityCast, of which he is the CEO, also Slate Political Gabfest, a bunch of other stuff. So how did I know you were at the Washington City Paper, so you have some roots here in the capital. How did you get here? I noticed also you raised some money from Airbnb at another stop in your career. So walk us through how you got here today.
Sure. So I'm a native Washingtonian. I'm born and bred. Well, I wasn't born here, but I've been lived here for now almost 63, all except 6 months of my life. And then after I left as a secure, we took a huge investment from Airbnb, and I wanted to do something new. Pandemic was starting, and Tim O'Shaughnessy, who's the CEO of Graham Holdings, which is a fantastic, huge local...
Graham is in Graham, right?
Graham is in Graham.
And we all know here in Washington, D.C.
It's the Graham family, and Tim has been the CEO, I don't know, about 8 years. And he is somebody who's really interested in local media. The company obviously has a long history with the Washington Post. They own 6 local TV stations, but also really interested in audio. And so Graham Holdings had owned the largest podcasting data analytics company. They had been the largest investor in the chief podcasting company. And Tim and I started talking, and he asked the question, why is it there hasn't been in the local podcasting the same kind of success that other forms of podcasting has had, the sports podcasting or the political podcasting or storytelling, invest in science, like all these subjects. Why has local podcasting not taken off in quite the same way? And he thought, if we build a national network and we build it around daily and local, there was a real business opportunity. And so that's what was the birth of CityCast, was an idea of Tim O'Shaughnessy's that I've been building on, and then we're now, as I said, we're now in 10 cities, and we hope to be one day in 50 or 100.
Is Baltimore in your plans? That's my hometown, so please be gentle.
Baltimore will one day be in our plans. It's not right now.
Number 49, I know. Come on, you can do it.
Well, I think the interesting thing about Baltimore, this is one of the reasons how we make the decision, is that Baltimore has the Baltimore Banner, this new digital media startup.
Yes.
And there are a lot of great journalists who've been bid up for very high wages in Baltimore, and it's hard to just launch there because you have to find someone and pay them more than it's highly funded digital startup this time.
Well said. I hadn't even thought about that. I know the founder of Baltimore Banner, and we're all hoping that he, mimics ProPublica. And actually, speaking of ProPublica, or the model, you are a for-profit enterprise, correct?
We are a for-profit, wholly owned, for-profit company for part of Graham.
And is advertising revenue today the majority of how you get profit, or what are some of the revenue streams?
Well, we are not profitable yet, so it's very much an investment phase. But our revenue is 100% advertising right now, but it will not be. So we are we'll have podcasting ad revenue. We have a newsletter. In DC, our newsletter is called Hey DC. All our newsletters are called Hey. And so we have newsletter advertising. And then we will have a subscription or membership program, but we have not launched that yet. We'll probably launch it late next year to be the start.
David Plotz, CEO of CityCast, joining us here on What's Working in Washington. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So from city to city, do your city managers, or whatever you call them, do you share stories? So if I'm listening to the podcast about Boise, I might hear about something that happened in Washington, D.C., or is that to come?
We've done that a little bit. So our lead producers in each city do check in with each other, but we tend not to do. What will happen is we'll do a story in Boise, and the Chicago team will hear it and think, oh, the same phenomenon is happening in Chicago, let's redo it for Chicago. Not, we're going to run exactly what ran in Boise, because that was Boise focused, but they will take that topic and run it in Chicago. And so it's more topic inspiration than it is we're doing exactly the same thing. It turns out to be pretty complicated to produce a podcast that will work in Boise and in Chicago at the same time. You really have to do it separately.
This is David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, joining us here on What's Working in Washington. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. When we return, we're going to talk about the difference between news and public interest, which I'm sure they face every single day. More after this. Every week on What's Working in Washington, we talk to power players about innovation in the federal government and how business in the region is keeping us competitive. If you are a D.C. insider and want to know what leaders in other industries are talking about, we give you that insight. So thanks for listening. If you know someone we should be talking to on our show, let us know. We want perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. You can reach out through our website or through Twitter. Many of our guests have come to us from others who say, hey, if your show's